Welcome to the Lifestyle Chase. This podcast features high performers who have found a way to live their best life while balancing their health, wellness, friends, and family. Proudly hosted by me, Chris Little. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome to episode 33 of the Lifestyle Chase. Joined by Brandon today. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm great. So, tell me about your day. How did you wake up today? What did you do first thing? What time did you wake up at?
We're usually up. I can't really seem to set an alarm at like an even number, so it's usually like 7:01, 7:33. So I think today was like 7:01, and then a 7:33 morning.
Yeah.
I usually get up, take the dog out. We've got a 12-year-old dog named Nixon, and so usually take care of her needs first. Then we definitely have some coffee. Heather and I try and have coffee before, like just like some connection time in the morning before we do anything else, because it becomes really easy to just get up and try to get out the door. We try to enjoy some alone time first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then I usually get breakfast and the lunches together, and since it's pretty early in the day, like here we are at work, but yeah, that's about the morning.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. How about the rest of your day? How does your day kind of play out?
I would say, as many people know, like business ownership is never very linear, so it'll vary day to day. Lots of it is connecting with the community via emails and that sort of stuff. We always come in and check on our staff and our contractors, like the majority of the team members that we run into. That's the main priority since we are in a business of people. So I would say it definitely varies, which makes it pretty exciting. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So take me to let's take yourself back to like grade 6.
Grade 6, okay?
Grade 6. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I actually had a very clear vision of what I wanted to be. Maybe not in grade 6, but by grade 9, I wanted to be a phys ed and health teacher.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I went to Grand McEwen and played some volleyball there and transferred to U of A and got my phys ed and ed degrees, and I taught in the education system for a few years, like exactly what I thought I wanted to do, like coach and teach kids, and I did that for a whole 4 years.
What was the toughest part about being like a coach or a mentor to kids?
I think the toughest thing was the emotions and the individual personalities. So I actually did some studies under a man named Bruce Brown, and I changed my coaching from kind of the way I was coached, which was very negative reinforcement based, to positive reinforcement based, which I found had a really profound effect on the teams that I coached, like once I got a little bit of additional coaching myself.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what do you think inspired you to have such a clear vision that you would have it from grade 9 all the way till like high school, like all the way through, and actually carry it out, follow through with it?
I think I have a lot of resilience and drive, and if there's something that I set my mind to, I'd like to think that I can actually achieve it. And I think at the time, the most inspiring people in my life were, number one, like my dad, who's always been a business owner. He was my number one inspiration, but I was very heavily influenced by the younger coaches and the younger teachers that were in my life. And I, at the time, like I wanted to be like them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me more about like your dad, like your parents. Like what kind of an influence did they have on you?
Oh man, I don't know. I think lots of people say, like, my parents are the best. They've always been extraordinarily supportive. Like I'm very close with them. They actually live just around the corner from Heather and I. And so, I don't know. I even remember in my grade 9 yearbook, the questions that you get, and one of them is like, who is your idol? And like I wrote down my dad, and like I kind of always have since. And so I've always had my parents on this really high pedestal, and I still do to this day. They've been married for 41 years, and my dad turned 70 this year, so we're going to take them to Mexico. So
That's amazing. That's pretty cool to be able to take like your parents to Mexico.
Yeah, we're pretty fortunate. We've saved up quite a bit, and it's going to be really, really great, I think. So it's coming up in June.
What are you going to do when you're in Mexico?
Hopefully as little as possible.
So are you, like, when you travel, are you like a resort person, or do you like to like create your own adventure?
Well, previously I was very much into the adventure.
Yeah.
When I was doing some other professions more full-time, like when I was trying to teach more full-time and when I had my massage practice, I was really trying to look for adventure, outside. And I think now that we are in like business ownership and directing and, you know, leading and coaching a lot more people, I definitely resonate more with go somewhere, be taken care of, so there's no cooking or cleaning, which I didn't actually think that I would like. But when we were just in Mexico, right after Heather's acupuncture exams, like, it was nice to just sit around and do not much.
Yeah.
We're still very much routine. Like, it was get up, go to the gym, have coffee, have breakfast, go to the pool. I did that for 7 straight days, and like, I would do it for another week if I could.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense, especially after, like, I can only imagine the stress that goes into, like, creating a business that's kind of new and, like, unique, and, like, there's not too many others to replicate, so you're always kind of on your toes, like, trial and error, stuff like that.
I would 100% agree with that. The first year of business, as we, you know, sit down and check in with all of our team members, the bigger thing that we're seeing is, like, we learned a lot in the first year. We learned a lot.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
Yeah.
What's been the most pivotal trip that you've gone on, looking back at, like, your trips where you created your own adventure? Because I like to believe that when we travel, we always get, like, this big life lesson from it.
I agree. I think, you know, it actually wasn't a big adventure. It was actually pretty recently. So Heather and I run some of the yin yoga teacher trainings in the city, and we usually end up creating lots of content when we go away. So it was on a semester break from Heather's program, and we just took a quick few days out to Invermere, which is a place that we really resonate with. We've been to Fairmont a lot of times, and my family has a timeshare there. And we had been asked if we would develop a level 2 course, and we're like, yeah, sure. And we, you know, kind of had a few registrants, and I think the most pivotal thing for us was we just went and we reconnected after Heather's school, and we, like, built this, you know, an entire course. And I think that was really pivotal for us, because it wasn't something that we thought we were actually capable of doing.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what kind of created the transition from, like, one career to the next? Because you were a phys ed teacher for 4 years, and then what was the light switch change? What was the moment that made you think time for change?
Well, after my teaching career, and in my degrees, I also took my personal training certification. So I always felt like I kind of had a little bit of a fallback, because when I was teaching, I still ran a little personal training business, and then I kind of bridged the you know, what I learned from coaching and teaching to training to massage and yoga. So all of those kind of paired really well together. But I still remember I had one extraordinarily pivotal moment when I was teaching. It was in the 4th year of my teaching, and I found this 1 week progressed to, I kept showing up at work as O Canada was playing, snuck in the back door, and then I tried to leave even before the buses were. And I was like, wow, this is no way for a 28-year-old to live. So essentially, like, I wasn't happy. So I didn't even really give it a ton of thought. I simply wasn't happy. And I'm like, this is no way for me to live. So I kind of did whatever I needed to do to change that.
That's cool. Like, that makes sense. I can relate with that. Like, I think at one point I kind of felt like, okay, I'm kind of getting old, and I need to make a change that makes me happier about waking up and going to work. And sometimes it's just fulfilling our purpose, you know, like,
absolutely,
feeling like we are making the maximal impact versus just doing something really well, sort of thing.
Absolutely.
So what were your next steps? Like, you knew that you had to make a change, you sort of had your backup stuff. What did you do next?
What did when I just essentially, one day when I was supposed to go into my 5th year, I started packing up my office, and the principal came in to the gym, and he's like, yeah, like, we missed you at orientation yesterday. I said, yeah, I'm handing in my resignation. And he didn't really know what to say. He went back to his office. He literally said nothing. And I just walked into his office, and I said, like, here's my resignation. Like, I wish everyone well. And I just walked away. I sold my house when I was living in Redwater. I sold my house. I bought a house in Sherwood Park, and I moved home.
Holy crap.
Yep.
So then what?
Then I ended up doing some personal training. I pretty much had to transition pretty quickly. And in the meantime, I mean, in hindsight, wasn't the smartest, but, you know, I had taught for 4 years, so I did have a little bit of a pension. So I ended up cashing out my pension so I could live, essentially. Delved into the personal training industry, quickly realized, and as you would know, It's very, very taxing. It's really great when you can see 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people in a day, but it's not generally, at least it wasn't for me, it wasn't sustainable. So I decided to diversify with massage therapy. I thought it would be a nice pairing, and it was for a lot of years.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, what was the toughest moment in that transition, aside from like the sustainability of the industry? Like, you just made this big jump. What was the thing that was most scary?
I think at the time the scariest thing was telling my parents that I didn't want to be a teacher anymore. Because, for them the paradigm was that, ever since I was 15, I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to be in the school system and coach and mentor kids. And then I quickly realized that that wasn't the environment for me to do that. So, my parents thought since I was 15, like I was going to be a teacher until I was in my 50s, and here I am only 28, and I said, hi, I'm not going to teach anymore, and I put my house up for sale. So I think that was the scariest part, was just telling them and wondering how they were going to feel, even though I wasn't happy.
But then what did you learn about your parents after you told them?
Well, your parents want the same thing as you do. They just want you to be happy.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
But I mean, I think that was because I still had them and still do have them on such a high pedestal. Like, I think lots of kids, even though like I'm almost 40, I'm not exactly a kid. Like, no one still really wants to disappoint their parents, and so that's how I felt at the time.
Yeah.
So in hindsight's 2020, I'm like, that's actually pretty silly, because they were pretty understanding, and my dad was also excited because I was going to move into the area of being an entrepreneur and being a business owner, and that's what my dad's been since he was 19. So, yeah.
Well, and I think sometimes we get our head wrapped around like what we think other people will think, and we're supposed to just think about what will make us the happiest, because the people who are most invested in us are going to be the most happiest when we are happy.
Exactly.
So what was your dad's business like?
My dad runs a court reporting business, so he's essentially the person in the room, in a courtroom or in a boardroom, who is deciphering what everybody is saying.
Yeah.
So when he was 19, he was looking for someone that had 100% employability, and that was court reporting. So that's what he did.
That's awesome.
And he's very, very good. He actually had a job offer with the government in the United States. So when I was younger, we moved to Hawaii for a couple of years, and my dad worked there, and then we were in BC for a couple of years in both Langley and White Rock, but essentially all of our family's here in Sherwood Park in Edmonton, so we were only gone for about 3 or 4 years, and then I've been back here since grade 4.
Nice.
Yeah.
What about your mom? What does she do?
My mom's an executive assistant, and right now she's at the Cross Cancer Society. It's kind of her dream job. She just transitioned there in the last couple of weeks, so she's very, very thrilled to be, in the later stages of her career, but where she'll probably end it in, the place that she always wanted to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could describe 3 positive qualities that you would want to have of your own that come from your parents, what would those 3 qualities be? So 3 for your mom, 3 for your dad.
Like qualities that they pass down?
3 qualities that you just want to own throughout your life, that you want to like maintain for years and years and years, that you got from them.
Oh, 3 each. My mom is very, very kind. So
Yeah.
I would say kindness. She also taught myself and my younger brother compassion for others, which isn't necessarily, compassion and empathy aren't really putting yourself in someone else's shoes, because that's really impossible. It's almost just like seeing things from a different perspective, or seeing things from someone else's perspective. So my mom definitely distilled that, and it was that third thing that I described before, which was just like do things that make you happy. Like my mom has had a number of jobs because like she just wants to be happy. Work is not the most important thing, happiness is. So for my dad, I don't know, my dad's just like a whole nother character. I would say determination is one thing. He was always determined to, essentially build a great family and have a great home and take care of us. So he was also very present. Like, I can't even think of a sporting event that they weren't at. They even drove to all the small towns when I was teaching in a small town just to watch me coach. So that's another one. And I think probably loyalty. Like, be loyal to the people who are around you. So I would say that would be the third.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I like to think that, like, our parents or our mentors, people that we look up to or we really respect, are creating a legacy, and we continue that legacy. And there's certain things that stay the same and certain things that we adapt and add on. But it's just neat to really recognize like this path of like values or like our things that we keep constant in our life, because you can trace that back. You can find patterns. You can find reasons that people are the way they are because of the things that they've chosen to prioritize. And I always like chatting with guests about that, because sometimes people don't realize that because they spend time with these certain people in their lives, that's what makes them happy, that's what makes them fulfilled, it makes such a difference. Like taking time to be close with siblings or close with friends or close with aunts and uncles, like whoever it is, because everybody's dynamics are different.
Yep.
But everybody has that structure. It's like we can't go through life just on our own.
Exactly.
If you were to plan out your week, what are 3 things that have to be in it? Whether it be like something you do for yourself, something you do with somebody else. What are those 3 things that no matter what, like you have to do them?
3 things that I have to do. Well, I have a very strong desire for balance. So if we put self-care in there, I mean, it would probably be almost number 1, 2, and 3, because, you know, I do like to either get to the gym or work out in our basement or get to a yoga class, whether it's at Moto Sherwood Park or it's off White Ave at Sattva. So I would say that kind of activity is super important to me, but also on the softer side, like here at Park Integrative Health, we've got, you know, massage and acupuncture, Reiki, counseling and nutrition. And so while I don't get my counseling here, like mental health is super important. So the things that we don't have here, I essentially outsource for. So I do see a massage therapist here. I've actually seen all of them. I see Heather, who's my partner for acupuncture. And then I've got a therapist in the city, and I also outsource for things like chiropractic. So I either see my good friend that I went to high school with, Dr. Baxter, who's just down the street, or another chiropractor in the south side, Dr. Kevin Watson. So anything that we don't have here, I try and get out into the city for some self-care. So I would say that's super important. Some one-on-one time with Heather that is not business related, because it's really, really easy for us to live together, run a yoga business together, run Park Integrative Health together, and then only talk about work. So I would say the one-on-one time is super important. And another non-negotiable is some concerted time with Nixon, because now that she's 12, I don't like saying it or hearing it, but she is a senior dog. So I would say that's something else that I must get in with the week. And if I added a 4th, it would be to, you know, connect with my parents, whether I stop by or I phone or what have you.
That's awesome. How often do you think you connect with your parents, like in a week?
Well, thankfully there's text messaging, right? So I probably text them every day. I'm not a big sit down and talk on the phone. So when I was working on the south side, it was nice to call them on the way home or on the way to work for a nice 20-minute conversation. But we're only about 7 minutes away now.
Yeah.
So we don't talk on the phone as much, but there's usually some kind of daily contact. And we've got a good family thread, because I don't see my brother as often as I'd like to, and my sister-in-law and my 2 nieces, but they post everything that the girls are up to on Facebook. So, I mean, I think as much as I'm not really, you know, I'm not overly technologically savvy, and if I could not have a cell phone, I wouldn't, but I think that, as everyone knows, it really helps you to stay connected. So even though I don't get to see Lily and Poppy as often as I would like to, I still get to be a part of their lives. So, yeah.
Totally. What's your favorite thing about being an uncle?
The stage where they like me, because there's stages where they don't. But I'm definitely in an upswing where like I'm super important, and sometimes if my parents are babysitting or they're in town because they live on the south side, they'll bring the girls by, and they seem to right now they're excited to see me. So I'd say that's a good thing.
How old are they?
Lily's 5 and Poppy is almost 3.
Nice.
Yeah.
You got till they're about like 8 or 9, and then they start thinking that maybe other people are cooler, hey? Like
well, I don't know.
that's
I'm hoping that they'll just think that I just keep getting cooler, and then they just won't like their parents as much. I'm sure that's the phase that we'll go through, and we'll just be the cool aunt and uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I have a couple nieces, and they're getting older and older, and I'm like, okay, I gotta get more tattoos or just get more like tough looking or something because I have to maintain the cool uncle facade.
Yeah. I think it's a facade for everybody.
Yeah,
Because none of us are really that cool.
No, we just think we are. But
Yeah.
as long as we think we are, that's the
Exactly.
important thing.
Yeah.
So you had your personal trainer certification. You got into massage therapy. How did you get into yoga?
I got it. Well, I actually got into yoga when I was closer to 18. My mom took me to a class that was just when yoga was very less popular here, especially in Edmonton and Sherwood Park, and it seemed to be just a room full of women, their angry husbands, and me. And so it didn't really seem like a safe place at the time, so I sort of abandoned it and got really heavily, I played some college volleyball, and then I got into running marathons and half marathons, and when my body figured out like this isn't really a good thing for me, one of my good girlfriends, Corinne, was like, you need to come to yoga with me. And I went, and at the time when Bikram was just about all that there was, like that's kind of where I got my start, because I'd always been a little bit more on a spiritual side, and I hadn't really made that connection to what yoga could bring to my life. So I ended up starting to practice, and then I ended up at a studio that at the time I really resonated with, and I delved into taking my first teacher training.
That's awesome. What was going through your mind when you went into that first teacher training?
Well, the first thing was we were told to, I didn't have a meditation practice at the time, and they told us to bring something comfortable to sit on, and I didn't really know. So I went and got like this big, massive cushion that probably took up 2 or 3 spaces, because like I had no idea to like set it down and like realize that, most of the other people in the room are just gonna like meditate on a couple of blocks. So I think like that was what was going through my mind was at the time was like, I'm really out of place.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And what were 3 of the most positive outcomes of doing that first teacher training?
3. One of them was that it was a really great creative outlet for me to sequence classes and to look at themes and find quotes and really connect with the room. So it brought out something creative for me. It was a new form of discipline to kind of, for a short while, I would say I was very in balance. Like it was only do yoga. There wasn't a whole lot of gym component. So it taught me that there could be a different side to activity. And 3, I think ultimately, like I really wanted to get back into a mentorship and teaching role. So it allowed me to create workshops, to eventually take enough training where I could create my own training, to, take all of my different backgrounds and all of Heather's different backgrounds and be able to share those things with the community.
So how much hours of training, like just to learn new stuff, would you say you've done?
Well, in the yoga area, I have over 1,400 hours of different trainings, whether it's yin or it's vinyasa or when I took my moksha moto training. So I would say, yeah, I think I have written down it's over 1,400. I haven't been to anything concerted in the last little while, but it's definitely on the agenda to study under a couple of my teachers as soon as I can.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. So what, out of all the things that you have gotten continuing education for, what would you say you've put the most time towards? Would it be like yoga? Would it be like your teaching certification?
Well, I would say just by the proxy of how much time it actually took, like it would be teaching as a whole. So,
Yeah.
Going through the, the university and college system for 6 years and then bridging it into what we're doing now, I would say that's been the most time, but I don't think any of it really prepares you to, school doesn't exactly prepare you for your job. Just like
No.
all those life experiences didn't really, like it prepared me in a sense to have what we have now here at Park, but I would say by no means am I an expert, and I think we've got something to, like we learn something new, like actually almost every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And I think it's neat because attitude changes so much of outcome kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like having that, well, especially the idea that like everybody we meet we can learn something from, but also the idea of like even the most like developed experts, they have not reached their maximum
Mhm.
growth. There's always something new to learn. So what's on your radar for your next thing you want to learn? What's your next, like, let's say a short term 1 year goal for stuff you want in your brain?
I would say it would be a little bit more on solidifying what a brand is. Like, we work very closely with Karina at Henrik Branding Co. And, I would say I'm trying to learn the most that I can about culture and brand, because that's exactly what we're trying to build here is a really wonderful culture where people can come in, whether they're a patient or a client or they work here, where they can be authentic and be themselves, and they can move out of this idea of being perfect and be human. That's really what we're trying to foster here. So I really want to learn more about how to make that sustainable and long term, because often it's made, the culture building has made the business portion a little bit slower, and we're okay with that. So I want to know more about how to make it long term and sustainable, which comes with a lot of back end work.
Yeah, makes sense. So what was really the fire that sparked you to like want to have something like this? Because it's quite a big thing to jump into.
It was a couple of things, actually. One was when I got into contracted work, like training in massage and yoga, I thought like, wow, this is a really great way to get more time back in my life, because now I'm in control of my time. And as you might know, after a few years, you're like, I'm actually not in control of my time, because every minute I'm not working is potential money lost. Like, that kind of became the mindset of like never wanting to take a vacation, because like, I'm going to go away, I'm going to lose this much money, it's going to take me this long to recover. So I found that I didn't actually have a whole lot of control in that sense. I felt like there was always something to do. And that was another thing that I learned from my dad. He's like, make sure that you enjoy the slow times, because when it gets too busy, he's like, you're going to wish it was slower. So sometimes I get to remind him of the same thing now. Yeah. So ultimately, I wanted to find something that I could gain a little bit of the time back for more of a balanced lifestyle, even though it is very full. I don't like to really use the word busy, because everyone's busy in their own right. There's this glorification of busy, but I would say the days are full, but they're very rewarding because we're dealing with people. Yeah.
Nice. Makes sense. So in your first year of growth, and you talk about like wanting to build on your brand and the culture and the identity, what were the 3 toughest lessons that kind of motivate you to really want to build into that brand? Because everybody has like those growing pains, or those just the things that's like, oh shit, I wish somebody would have told me about that.
I actually think we got a lot of really great advice. I actually don't think there's something that I wish someone had have told me. It's just always surprising when you actually experience it. People would say, when you have to fire your first person, like, it's going to be awful, it's going to be terrible. And I'm like, oh, it probably won't be that bad. Or, no, I'm pretty sure we picked a whole bunch of great people, and like, I won't have to do that for a long time. But like, I had to fire my first person 6 weeks in. And so, people prepared us really well. They prepared us for what could be the rigors of staffing, because people are human. Here we don't offer people sick days, we offer them wellness days. We don't want them to have to feel like they have to lie about why they're not here, that they have to hide if it's something that is mental health related. We just call them wellness days. And so staffing can become a really, very taxing at times when people are human. So that was something that we were told, but it's something different to experience. And also that building your culture will be the toughest thing, because often it's viewed as micromanaging or this top-down sort of leadership, when really it's about solidifying the vision and what we tried to do when we built this. And it's wonderful that we got to do it where I grew up, which is here in Sherwood Park.
That's awesome. Aside from your parents, who are 3 of the most like influential mentors in your life?
Influential mentors. Well, Bruce Brown, who's the man that coaches football, was definitely one of my coaching mentors. So he stands out for sure as someone that I learned a great deal from as far as leadership and coaching goes. So he was for sure one of those. I probably do like learn the most from my partner Heather. She's brilliant, and I've probably learned in the time that we've been together like an awful lot about just about life. So I would say she's definitely a mentor of mine. And Joe Barnett, who's my direct yin yoga teacher, I would say has had a very large impact on the way I view the world, because he's always taught me like, you don't have to do fancy workshops, you don't have to do fancy trainings, you don't have to make them trendy. He always said like, walk the true path. Just keep walking the path of sustainability and teach that these aren't only yin principles, they're life principles. He's like, make your training impactful so it's something that people can actually apply. So I would say those would be the three besides my parents.
Nice.
Yeah.
And on the topic of yin yoga, what is your favorite thing about yin yoga?
My favorite thing about yin yoga, practicing or teaching?
Just in general, like blanket statement, answer it however you like.
Blanket statement. I like that there is an infinite amount to learn, and there are an infinite amount of lenses to look through when you practice or teach.
So tell me the origin story. Like, I want to know as much history as you know of yin yoga, because I am just like enchanted by yin yoga, but by the amount of like mobility that I can get and just the guidance, it's just it's wonderful. So tell me the legacy of yin yoga.
Well, I don't know if I'm by no means an expert. I can tell you that my direct teacher is Joe Barnett. He's in Tucson in Arizona. So when we were in Arizona last year, we got to spend some time with him. He studies under Paul Grilly and his wife, and they're kind of known as the founders of yin yoga, essentially westernizing it. So they run a training out of California that we're very interested in going to. And Paul Grilly studied under someone named Dr. Motoyama, who taught him a lot about the energetics of yin yoga. He has since passed away. It was a really big loss to the community. And so I would say, I'm sure yin was created way before then, but that's the lineage that I study under. So that would be about the extent of my knowledge of the legacy.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. It's neat to sort of hear the perspective and the background and all that stuff, because like the average person that goes to a yoga class, like half the time I sign up for a yoga class, I didn't even look at what kind of yoga it was.
Right.
Like, I've gone to a hot yoga class in sweatpants and like a long sleeve shirt, and it was the biggest mistake I ever made. Because like they're like, all right, and now we will set up for Shavasana, and I like put my back on the yoga mat and it made a big farting noise, and I was so embarrassed and just dripping sweat. So now I read the description.
Smart.
But like delving more and more into it, like I completely respect that there are so many different ways to find yoga, and then within that there are so many different instructors.
Absolutely.
And it's neat. It's not too dissimilar to any other way that people find their fitness, because like even spin class, like you could go to two different spin classes and it would be a completely different experience, whether that be in the same studio, different studios. You could go to two different trainers, completely different experience.
100%.
And it's neat. And I think a lot of it comes down to what kind of a person that instructor or trainer or whoever it is. So when you're looking for people in your life that you're going to allocate time to, what are some like characteristics or personality traits that you look for? What's the first thing you notice when you meet somebody new?
First thing I notice when I meet somebody new, generally their handshake, first and foremost. I wouldn't say that I ever make a judgment on it, but it's probably the first thing that I notice. Second thing, it's funny, like when I was in all my other careers, like, I was all about like Lululemon and sneakers and what that will look like, and now that we run a business, I'm way on the other side of that. So I would say like I end up noticing people's shoes, surprisingly, and I never thought that I would say that in a million years, because like I wore strictly sandals, even in the winter, probably up until like 4 or 5 years ago. So, yeah. And then
So what happens if somebody walks into Park Integrated wearing sandals today? What goes through your mind?
What goes through my mind? Like, well, you know, I don't actually make the judgment on the shoes. I just happen to notice. I would think like it's way too cold. It's minus 25 today.
Yeah.
So, and then if they're walking in the building, I think if those are soiled, you need to take them off.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What else do you kind of like assess or notice when you're meeting somebody new?
Eye contact,
Yeah.
I would say is a big thing, and generally, you know, I'll probably notice the way that they carry themselves, which is an intangible, so I probably couldn't explain it. It's almost like the way that they feel. You know,
Yeah.
I'm kind of moving into a different phase in my life where I'm trying to focus more on the subtle body and like how things feel and listen more to that. So I would say I notice how they feel. Like, how do they feel? Which I don't then say like, oh, a person feels angry or that person is something. It's just I notice how they feel, and that helps me to create the relationship of compassion.
That's cool. That's cool. Like it's neat, and I've talked to a few people about like handshake. Like that's a big one. And sometimes I'll think, oh, I give a person a handshake, don't think twice. But it's like that is your first chance to say like, this is how I present myself, and this is how I bring myself to you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you can't really half-ass it. So every time when I'm like, oh man, I didn't really give it my all on that handshake. I really screwed that up. I'm gonna have to like, how much effort do you think it takes to redeem yourself after a shitty handshake? Because like, I honestly think it probably takes like 5 more encounters after a bad handshake to like earn that back.
Probably, because I can think of a few times when like someone went to squeeze my hand before I got my hand all the way in, and like now all of a sudden I'm giving them like this little British
Yeah.
handshake. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I think that, well, I'm gonna have to debrief this with my therapist now, because like that didn't go very well.
So, talking about things that don't quite go as planned in all your travels, because I imagine you've traveled a fair bit. Like, how many trips would you say you've gone on?
I wouldn't say I'm an extensive traveler. I think I was so focused on getting a teaching job, because that's what I wanted to do, that when the group of friends that I was friends with in university, when we all graduated, there was, a group of 6 of us, and 4 of them went traveling to Australia for either 1, 2, or 3 years, and 2 of us got jobs. So I would say like I didn't really do a ton. I haven't done a ton of traveling. We did run a yoga retreat in Greece with a good friend of ours, Mel Pere, a few years ago. So we went to Italy and Greece, and so I would say that that's the most extensive trip. But with the business and with our dog, like, we don't travel overly far or overly often.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But organizing an event outside of your own country is no small feat.
It takes a lot of like 6 to 9 months planning, I would say.
What if somebody else was going to do that? Because I have a few friends that are organizing their own retreats. What's some advice you'd give them in like the preparation process? Like things that they don't want to forget like a month in advance of the event.
That's a great question. We do some consulting too, because we've got some people like in our circle who are trying to run retreats or workshops. So we do some consulting with them because we have done it before. So number 1, based on personal experience, like make sure your passport is not going to expire while you're traveling.
That's a good one.
That's probably, I experienced that. I would say that is a big one. To seed plant 6 to 9 months in advance, to get someone awesome in the city to do your graphics, because posters, I feel, and visuals do matter. And continually follow up with people who have shown interest, because people want that help. It's the same way that I built my massage practice before. I was consistent check-ins about them as people, not, hey, you said you were going to sign up for this retreat. It was more like, hey, this is a check-in, or this is where we're at. And I find that the more relationship building you can do, the more successful it'll be.
Awesome. And how about like logistics once you get to the new location? Because it's like you're not familiar with the setting. Like running something in Sherwood Park, where you know Sherwood Park.
Oh yeah,
is way different.
Yeah.
Than like going to a country that you may have never been to before.
I would say the number 1 thing is to make sure that you've solidified travel from the airport to your destination, because you can generally figure out the rest. You know, there's Wi-Fi everywhere now. You can figure out everything else, but make sure you know how you're going to get from point A to point B, because that's going to be the most stressful for most people.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like, just get their butt into the seat that it needs to be in and to the location where they need to be. And then if, like, snacks are late, no big deal.
And, you know, people want to know, like, am I going to have to, you know, row my own canoe from this spot to the island where their retreat is? Because, like, I didn't know that. You know, people want as much detail as possible, but you certainly can't plan for everything.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, in all of your ventures and all of your certifications and all of the changes in life, selling and buying places and moving, what is the toughest obstacle that you've ever come across?
The toughest obstacle, like a single obstacle?
Yeah, or even just like a couple, or...
I would say... I would say a very tough obstacle over time would be, I wouldn't say losing friendships and business relationships, but the fallout of, you know, going through your life and realizing that, like, people that you thought were going to be lifelong friends aren't anymore. You know, I went from checking in with people, you know, I used to call, you know, hundreds of my friends on Christmas Eve, and then they turned into text messages, and then I realized, like, you know, I was kind of the only one doing that. So, you know, at one point, like, I just kind of had to stop. So I think that's been one of the hardest lessons and obstacles. It has been being okay that, so, you know, it's the whole people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, and a lot of those people were simply part of a different lifetime.
That makes sense. What kind of advice would you give to somebody else kind of going through those things? Like, they're progressing through their life and they're finding that their friend circle has shrunk, or they're finding that when they went after a passion, everybody fell off of their wagon, kind of thing. Like, what reassuring sentiment would you leave them with?
I think the reassuring sentiment that I hold very true to myself is that your best life is on the other side of blank. It's on the other side of this obstacle. Your best life is on the other side of, you know, this dissolution of this relationship or this business partnership or what have you. So I would say that would be my advice. Like, your best life is on the other side of this shitstorm that you're in.
Yeah, so kind of like cutting out these end goals that we sort of envision, just focusing on what would make us the happiest and, like, enjoying whatever comes with it, sort of thing.
Yeah, and also finding ways to be okay with it, because it's not as easy as, oh, just let it go, or, oh, it's okay, or, you know, the adage of everything happens for a reason. You know, I think it takes some evaluation as to, you know, why things have turned out the way that they have, so that you can take some accountability and either be okay with it or say, like, actually, like, I don't want to lose these friendships. I don't want to lose what is over here. And then you decide where you get to put your time and energy.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Would you say that out of the people that get to spend the most time with you, are they all from, like, your massage and your yoga and all that ventures, or is it like people that you grew up with, or a mix of the two?
The people in my life, I would say I'm actually very, very introverted. My careers and everything that we're doing now is very extroverted, but I've always said, like, I want to live in that building in Dubai where everything is inside. I never want to have to leave my house, and if I didn't have to, I wouldn't. So yeah.
That's fair. So, like, how do you socialize? Do you socialize? What does that look like for you? Not, like, I'm not trying to get you to be like anybody else. I just want to see, what does socialization look like for you?
Well, I can tell you what socialization does not look like, and it is not small talk.
Yeah.
I am not good at it, nor do I really want to engage in small talk. I need to have meaningful conversations, which has led me to potentially be viewed as not approachable or cold or an asshole or any of those things, which, like, I think are all judgments based on not knowing someone.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm very uncomfortable with small talk because there's no substance to it.
Yeah.
So I really need connection when it comes to having conversations, much like this. Like, I'd rather talk about something that is happening in someone's life than,
How's the weather?
Yeah.
Like,
I know.
I like that though, because that's something that I've learned, because this is episode 33 now. In episode 1, it was with somebody that I knew quite well. Like, almost all my guests I've known pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
But I've learned to be a better listener, which has brought more value in all of my interactions. And I find there's probably a ton of people who see the same thing in me, like in myself being kind of introverted. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I would have to say when a person first meets me, I'm going to be pretty quiet, depending on the setting, the situation. But yeah, totally. Like, it's just finding something from that conversation and not just having the conversation for the sake of having the conversation.
Absolutely.
Which is, like, I enjoy that about my podcast, because I kind of just... I have certain values that I kind of want to, like, touch on, but I always accept that every single conversation is going to be different.
Absolutely.
Because depending on what the person's life is framed around, or what they say, is going to completely orient which direction that I go with the conversation. Mm-hmm. There's been times when I've, like, written out my questions and stuff, but I always know, like, some of these questions I might not even, like, ask.
100%, yeah.
Because they're going to answer it a certain way, and then I'm going to have new questions.
Yeah.
Because I heard what they said.
Yeah.
But it's so neat. Like, we always learn something in what we hear from others, and it might be in how they perceive what we've said, and it kind of mixes up what we were telling ourselves and gives it back to us in a way that helps us see more value in things that we do. Or it might be just some very, very much needed perspective.
Absolutely. We like the work of Brene Brown a lot, and in her book Dare to Lead, she's got a quote in there that says, "Listen with as much passion as you would hope to be heard." So that's what we try to do here when we are engaging with any of our team members. We listen with, as much attention as we possibly can, because, like, that's what we would hope for too. People have this huge desire to feel safe and to be heard, and while only a small number of people might get to be privy to your story, like, that's what we try to endeavor to do.
I like that. And on the topic of, like, leadership and stuff, what are 5 qualities that you would say makes a good leader?
5. Oh man.
It's funny, people are gonna be like, how does he come up with these numbers? Like, he's like 3, 5, 2. I guess
5 qualities of a leader?
Yeah.
Well, clear is kind. Clear feedback is actually very, very kind. Listen with as much passion as you'd like to be heard. Lead by example. So if our values are integrity, empathy, team-oriented, oh my God, now I'm drawing a blank. Integrity, empathy, team-oriented. If our values are our values, every decision that we make should be guided by that. So I think that you need to be able to, like I said, have the tough conversations and be able to take accountability if a bad decision is made, because people are big into accountability. And I think the most important probably is still being authentic, letting people know that we're still human, and this, as much as in a business there still is some sort of hierarchy, that we're people are people, and we're doing work as well.
Totally. That's awesome. A lot of people who are personal growth oriented, the best way to find growth in yourself is to sort of address your weakness and really focus on it. Because if you make your weakness your strength, just imagine how much better all your other qualities are. So if you were going to give yourself a self-assessment and be like, okay, what am I the worst at that I want to improve at the most? What would it be?
The worst at that I want to improve at? Well, I'm going to ruminate on it in the back of my mind, but my first piece of big self-development was that when I went to my first yoga training, like I was a disaster as far as like being emotional. Like I couldn't listen to someone else's story without crying or taking it as my own. Like it was like deeply personal. And then I sat down when I was then going to lead a teacher training. I had to like sit down with my two teachers who actually didn't live there anymore. They just happened to be back in town. And I said, like, I need you to help me, like, to not, you know, to be able to have conversations and listen to people and not take it on. Because I'm like, I can't lead a teacher training if every time someone tells me something sad, I start crying. I said, that's not, you know, standing and hold, like, there's no boundary there. So they were the first ones to teach me about boundaries, and with a lot of self-study and therapy and education from Heather, it was more like a boundary is not about what you're trying to keep out. It's about what you will let in, what is good for you in that moment. And lots of times people view boundaries as negative, but boundaries are neutral. Like, this is what's good for me. This is nothing personal. It's no different than the difference between not liking someone's behavior and not liking them as a person. Yeah. So I would say boundary setting is still something I am consistently working on. I would say I'm not bad at it, but it is so in flux of realizing what's good for you and what's not, or doing it anyway and finding ways to balance and self-regulate after. Because oftentimes, like, I'll come out of something and be like, holy shit, like, I'm really angry. And instead of saying, why am I angry? I like to pay attention, because there's an answer if you're saying, like, why. And that's why I gravitate so much with yin yoga, because, like, there's actually a reason if you evaluate it and if you give yourself that gift of paying attention. So I wouldn't say that I'm bad at boundaries, but I would say it's the thing that I consistently work on as far as self-development and growth, because that would also lend into socialization. Like, what events will be good for me, what events won't be, and what events do I need someone like Karina or Heather to say, like, you need to go to it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And it's something that everybody, I think, actively works on. And the difference between, like, knowing that they work on it and not is just them having the courage to admit it.
Mm-hmm.
Because time is of value, and whether that's monetary or just, like, looking at it as life has, like, an end point. We don't know when it is, but we just know that it's not, we're not going to have every day, like, it's just non-renewable.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, that whole setting those boundaries is so important.
Absolutely.
That's why it's so great to have, like, quality handshakes,
mm-hmm.
and have those times with parents and family and friends, and assess yourself and figure out if we are wanting to be in our own space and if that is of most value, or if we need that time with friends to be social, and what is the most meaningful. So I like that one, because if we, like, address that these are the things that we need to chip away at,
mm-hmm.
then we're going to be happier, because we've identified these things that are the most meaningful to us. Whereas if we're like, oh, like, the thing that I really need to work on is I just need a 6-pack. That's what I need. And that's not going to impact us as greatly as something as boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know the story of how you and Heather met.
I would say we very, very fortunately in this life met in the health and wellness industry. So it's very, very nice that we have a lot of similarities, and that we actually like each other enough to do most of our activities together. But I would say, like, we were probably together, like, long before this life. That's how it feels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's neat. I think that's how a lot of people end up feeling with their partner or significant other. Like, there's some kind of a connection or an energy, like a shared energy,
yeah.
And it jives, and each person is made better from the other person's presence, which is important, and it's just neat to discuss, because, like, people need support, whether in whatever capacity that
mm-hmm.
is.
We've always held in our relationship that the relationship is 100%. It's not 50-50. It's not you complete me. It's not two halves of a whole. Like we've always viewed it as we're two whole people, we're two individual people, and we have a lot to learn from one another. But we, even if our 100% looks different on a given day, like the relationship is still like, I'm going to give my 100% and you're going to give your 100%.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
And sometimes people need to hear that, like, chewed up, regurgitated back out to them, because they're like, oh, they aren't holding up their end of the bargain. It's like, well, you're both supposed to be whole and acting like parallel to each other as your best selves.
Yes.
So we're gonna segue to the last and final question, which I ask all my guests, and you know what it is. If you could give one piece of advice to somebody on how to live their most authentic life to the fullest, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say that it is to do some self-reflection on who you truly are, like what your essence is, what your values are, and go out and like unabashedly and with conviction and like go out and be that person, because I think everyone has a gift, like a true gift to give to the world, and they'll be able to do that if they've done enough work where they can stand in the authenticism of themselves and own it.
I like it. Like, figure yourself out and then go from there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
This has been a good chat.
It has been.
So
thanks for having me on the show. It's super humbling to be asked, so thank you.
You bet.
Yeah.
We'll see you around for sure.
Absolutely.